as I was saying, we have the privilege today of Mary Schick from the Phoenix Club up to do, I think it's your first demonstration to an audience. So we're going to be kind, everybody, but it should be very interesting. So Mary, if you're ready.
Today, we're going to talk about pyrography. I know that some of you like your turnings to be brown and round, and I'm going to try to convince you that you can put a little design on it and it'll still be brown and round, but it'll be enhanced. So that's what we're going to talk about today is some pyrography, and I hope you'll consider trying on one of your bowls a little bit of burning. So the first half, we're going to talk about pyrography basics, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and do an easy pattern for a bowl or a platter rim, something that's easy that you can get you started in pyrography. First, we have to start with safety notes. So if you could start the slides, first section. We can start with, if it's a nice day, work outside. Pyrography produces a lot of smoke, and it's great if you can work outside on a nice day. If not, you need a well-ventilated room. Next slide. Yep, that's it. Yes. So you need to use a fan of some type to pull the smoke away from you. That way you're not getting the full amount of smoke. Are we okay? All right. You're not getting the smoke directly into your face. You want to pull smoke away from you. A little fan works, a bigger fan works, and then there's also a couple of other products. Next slide, please. There's a couple of products available that will pull smoke away from you. Some of them have charcoal filters to help filter the air. Right now, that expensive one, the Razier dust collection, is on sale this week at Treeline for $4.35, just in case you're interested. Don't sit leaning over your work so that the smoke comes up into your face. Avoid blowing a fan at the tips of your pens, because it'll cool them down and you'll burn unevenly. Next slide. Use a ventilator type of mask. You want something that fits well on your face. You don't want to have just a plain dust mask. The smoke contains soot, and it's very fine particles. You don't want that in your lungs. And then just a couple common sense safety issues. Turn off the burner when you're done. Unplug it when you leave the room. You have a whole lot of wood and some very expensive tools, and you don't want something that's overheated to start a fire. Burn only untreated wood. Some of these woods with paint or finish on them can produce hazardous fumes. And then be careful when you're burning any sort of exotic wood. Sometimes they can cause allergic reactions. Okay. There's three kinds of pyrography. There's an arch type that resembles a painting. Thank you. And they're burnt at lower temperatures and using a lot of shading. This one is an example by Stephen Poole. He's got a nice book out on pyrography, and he does some very artistic work, just shading with burning. Next slide. This is another one of his that has all kinds of burning on it and also some color added. That's not the type of burning I do, but it's a lovely thing, and it's using a lower temperature and using a lot of shading and building up a layer of color by using very low heat. Next slide. Another type of pyrography is using to cut or incise a pattern. And this is something that you can add to your turning by just adding a little bit of interest or enhancement. Next slide. The third type of pyrography is branding or burning with a really hot tip and a repetitive motion so that you get a textured pattern. Most of you will recognize this as Molly Winton's work. She's well known for this basket weave pattern. I think most of us have seen her work, and it's very, very good. Okay, next slide. Let's talk about machines. There are a ton of them out there. Oh, handouts. Could you pass out the handouts? I've got some handouts that have this information. My lovely assistant, Alan. There are lots of different machines out there, and I put this chart in your handout. So if we can go to the next slide. The first type is what's called a solid tip burner. They're made by Walnut Hollow, and this is sort of like a soldering iron. It's not a fine tool. It's more of a craft type item. You can get it at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, that sort of level, and they range between $25 and $75. Most of them do not have any sort of temperature adjustment. And so you get what temperature comes out of the machine. And that's not always very helpful. So I would suggest if you want to get interested in pyrography, that you might want to try a little bit higher level machine. Next slide. This is a razor tip, which is a step up. These machines are ranked in order of highest heat, lowest heat to highest heat. And the razor tip is a good machine. You can get it on Treeline, Amazon. They run about $180. This is a single plug, meaning it has powers one pen, and it's a good machine. Next slide. This one's a Detail Master, and they are no longer made, but there's a ton of them available out on eBay. You can usually pick one up for about $75. But look at the pen. It has no insulation on it. They get really, really hot. So if you're going to use a Detail Master, you probably want to wear a glove because they are very warm. Next slide. A step up from that would be the Optima. It has, as you can see on the pen, it has a little foam tip on it. And it's a nice machine, has good power range, and is a little bit more comfortable to hold. Next slide. Colwood is a good manufacturer. They make good machines and good pens. The first one, the small one there, is the Colwood Cub, and it is not quite as high a power, but it's a good starting machine. The one next to it, the Detailer, is a little bit more higher level power, but also a really good machine. Next slide. This is Burnmaster, two of their units. The first one is the Hawk, and it has just one plug for pens. And the one next to it is what I use, the Burnmaster Eagle with two plugs. They're good machines. They have a nice control, and they will burn very hot. And the last machine I'll talk about, next slide, is a vaporizer. This is a machine that's made by Graham Priddle, and it's basically a car battery charger repurposed to be a burning machine. It gets very, very hot, and it's taking something that's not intended for pyrography and making it into a pyrography machine. Graham Priddle sells them, and you can find directions online to make your own. To me, it's a little bit dangerous, but that's the choice that's out there. In your handout, I've bolded the ones that are names of machines that I've used and would recommend. Many of the models have one or two jacks for pens, and it's really nice to be able to change back and forth between pens when you're working. That way you don't have to change out the whole pen, but realize that even with a system that has two pens, you're only using one at a time. It has a toggle, so you're either using the right or the left. So it's not a disadvantage to have a one port machine. because two people can't use it at the same time. It's one or the other is on. Okay, let's talk, next slide. Let's talk a little bit about hot wire pens. Most, other than the walnut hollow, most of the pens are hot wire, meaning it's a wire of some type bent into a certain shape for burning. The solid connection, most solid connection is a pen that is one piece, somewhat like a razor tip pen, and you don't change the tip. It's a solid pen. They have a better connection. The disadvantage is they're more expensive. They run between $25 and $38. So if you break the tip, you have to replace the pen. They're a little bit stronger, depending on the pressure you put on them, but they are a little bit stronger to resist the pressure. And they're faster change out because all you do is unplug one pen and put another pen in. The other type would be interchangeable tips. And the connection is not as steady because you're plugging a tip into something. But the great advantage is you can have a lot more of them because they're a lot cheaper. They run between $10 and $18. And if you break a tip, it's like other disposables in your shop. You're not losing that much when you break a tip. They are, since they don't have as tight a connection, they are easier to bend and damage. And it's a little bit more time consuming to change a tip. You have to either use a tool if it's a Coalwood or a screwdriver if it's a Burnmaster. Next slide, please. Here's a group of pens. And on the left side, the black pens are razor tip. You can see they have a little foam on them. There's the one furthest left is a regular, and the one next to it's heavy duty. They are vented, and they work on the razor tip machines or some of the other machines. The ones next to it are, those are the Detail Master, and they get very, very hot. They are a solid tip pen, meaning that they are one piece. The tip does not come out, but they get very, very hot. So you need to use a glove. Next to that is a Coalwood, and you can see how the tips plug in. And so that's how you get your heat connection, is they plug into the pen. There's just a ton of different tips. Coalwood makes a lot of different tips that I'm not sure that I know a use for, but there's a lot of them out there. And they're reasonably priced because you're just replacing the tip. The next set, the red ones, are the Burnmaster. And some of the tips you can see, you unscrew the little terminals, put in a new tip, and you're off and running. I find that handle is kind of triangular shape and is very good for my hand. It's easy to use, and it does not get hot even when I'm burning for a long time. So I do like the Burnmaster pens. The one next to it is one made by Graham Priddle. It has vents to let out the heat, so the heat doesn't build up, but it's too big for my hand. It's basically made out of some what do you call it, PVC pipe, and you have to make your own tips for it out of wire. Next slide. Some of the pens and cords are interchangeable, so that I can use the Coalwood on my Burnmaster machine. Burnmaster works on Coalwood, and then razor tip, all you have to use is a little stereotype connector, a little male-ended connector to be able to use it on Burnmaster. So they are interchangeable. You don't have to stick with one system. I use Coalwood pens a lot. I use some razor tip pens. Just there is a lot out there that you can use. We also talked about, next slide. There's also, this is a new one from Razor Tip. It's called a binding post handle, and you make your own tips. And so it has little screws on it, and you can make your own tips. That way you can make your own patterns and get creative. That's something new for them. And you also make your own tips if you're using the Graham Priddle pen. To make your own tips, you use nichrome wire, and it comes in 18, 20, 22 gauge, and you can use needle nose pliers, wire cutters, and depending on the tip, a small hammer and anvil, and make your own tips. There's a lot of videos out there on YouTube on how to do that. I'm not going to go into that today, but one thing I would recommend, if you're making your own tips and you're about to start a project, try to make two that look the same. Because if you break one and you're halfway through the project, you don't want it to look like you changed tips in the middle. Okay. Next slide. There's some common shapes of tips that we'll look at in a minute. They're writing tips, knife tips, ball tips, shaders, and some special shapes. Let's go to the next slide. This first one on the left is a knife edge, and it's a very long knife edge. So it's more like a skew. You're using it to cut lines. And it's probably one of the things I use the most because it's good for outlining. The one next to it is a shader, something that you can shade or color with heat. Something that I don't use as much, but that's one that's available. Next slide. Okay, writing tips. They come in different sizes. The regular writing tip is small, and then there's a micro. A lot of times people use these for signing the back of their work. They take some practice. They aren't going to cut a line. They kind of make a indentation, but they don't cut. And they're very easy to use. Then ones next to it are ball tips, and they come in all different sizes. And you can use that for background stippling, for making little dots in a background, or some of the larger ones, you can make a pattern out of the larger dots. Next slide. These are the sharp tips, fine tips, and also shading tips. Just a different view of them. Next slide. These are some of the special tips. And I had no idea about that people use these. They're for feathers or scales, depending on if you're making decoys or are making art with fish or reptiles on it, that they have special tips for scales and feathers. Who knew? I would also consider the basket weave a special tip. All right, next slide. Oh, that's the end of the slides. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how we care for the tips. As you're working on a piece of art or wood, you're going to build up carbon. And so the easiest way to clean your tip is you'll take a small brass brush and affix it to your workspace, because you're going to be coming over and quite often cleaning off the carbon. If you don't clean off the carbon, it's going to drag and produce uneven burning. So cleaning off the carbon is something you're going to be doing very frequently. So one way is to affix it to your workspace so it's right next to you. Another way to do that is putting the brush on a glove so that you have it handy and you can pull the tip through the brush and then go back to burning. This is just on with Velcro, and you can change it out easily. But I'd suggest that you use a glove that's not polyester or nylon, because you make sparks and you don't want them melting the glove. So a leather glove is preferable. Razor tip does make something that you can pull sharp tips through, and it'll knock off the carbon. They sell these. I don't think it works nearly as well as a brush. So I recommend the brush would clean better than just sliding it through here to knock off the carbon. You can also use an emery cloth or steel wool. If you're using a sharp pointed tip, then you can also sharpen them on a diamond hone. If you want them extra sharp, that's one way to do it. Over time, sharpening and cleaning will wear them out, and they'll get kind of fragile and thinner. And as they get thinner, they will eventually break. That's why I think that replaceable tips is the way to go. The art type people, that Stephen Pools, are burning at a much lower temperature. And so they tend to just rub their tips on Levi jean material. They're not building up as much carbon as we are. So that's their option. The hotter the tip and the more pressure you put on it, it causes bending and eventually will damage the tip. You can take, if you bend a tip, you can turn off your burner and bend it back into shape with your needle nose pliers. That works for a while. Eventually you'll have cracks and they will break, but turn off the burner, and then while it's still hot, use your needle nose pliers to straighten it back out. I definitely go through quite a few tips that I bend, and I save a few, but sometimes they don't save. Okay, what type of wood is best to burn on? Something with a tight grain and little figure. So cherry, hard maple, those are the two I prefer, but you can also use sycamore, beech, holly. Holly looks very nice because of the contrast between the dark and the light. Basswood looks really good because it's a light colored wood, but it doesn't turn well because it's too soft. You can't get a good edge on basswood. Avoid wide grain woods like oak, pine, ash. They don't burn evenly. You'll get going through the growth rings. It'll go fast and then slow, and so it doesn't look even. Beware of exotic woods. Sometimes they put off some hazardous fumes or fumes that can cause an allergic reaction. Before you start burning, just as if you were going to finish your bowl as normal, you want to have it sanded to 400 or 600, at least 400, if you're just putting a small design on it. If you're going to cover the whole vessel with pyrography, then you can probably get it down to just 320 or 220. Any questions so far? No. So how do you get started? One of the ways to get started is just practicing with your tips on a flat board. It's great if you can use a flat board that is the same kind of wood as you're turning. That way you'll see how the pen performs, how it moves across the wood, and what kind of temperature you need. It's also a good time to try making a sampler. A sampler is something like this. Let's see if I can hold that camera. So that you're trying out your different tips. Like this is a very small ball tip. Here's a medium ball tip. Here's a large ball tip. And you can see how they perform with different pressure and with different heat. So making a sampler is a good way to start. You can see what kind of marks it makes. You can try shading and see what kind of shading you can do. But a sampler is a good way to start and try out your tips. It's also a great time to use up those funnels that you have in the corner, because it gives you something round to practice on. That way you get the feel of working on something round without damaging the new piece with a great form that you just finished. Also half rounds. If you have a thick piece of wood, you can make a half round out of it, sort of a dome. This is a half round that I practiced a little carving and burning on using a straight tip and then using a ball tip for some stippling. So you can practice on these. It's a half, this way, it's a half round. Just put it on the lathe and round it. And the nice thing about these is if you decide you don't like it, you can turn it back off, put it back on the lathe, turn it off and do it again. So half rounds, that's an alternative for starting up. If your half round turns out really nice and you decide, I really like that, you can put it in a shadow box. Michael's, Hobby Lobby, those type of places sell shadow boxes. And that's a, let's see if I can do that. That's a nice way to give someone wall art instead of just shelf art. So much of what we give away to people, this way. This is just burned on one side and then carved on the other. So it's a sunflower, and it's a glass frame, frame with glass. So this gives you some wall art, and it makes nice gifts. So let's talk about some techniques before we get the burner actually on. Heat settings need to be hot enough so that you get an even burn without skipping. It's sort of like if you had a pen that's partly dried out and you draw a line and you get skips. You want to have the heat hot enough that you get a solid line, but not too hot that you get shadows on each side of that line. Think of an airplane doing touch and goes. If the airplane comes down and then lifts back off to do touch and goes, that's kind of the technique you want to use when you approach the wood. You want to come down and then lift back up. If you come down and then draw your line and then come back up, you're going to have a blob at each end. And so it's not a terrible thing, but it kind of doesn't look as nice. So you want to have a nice smooth approach to the wood. Just like some of you are carvers, I know, when you're carving, you want to make a tripod with your hands. So you're going to have your pinky and the tool and your other hand so that you're giving it support and steadying it so that you can draw a nice line. Where possible, the three-prong approach, the tripod, definitely helps. Sometimes it won't work because you need to turn the wood or the piece is awkward, but where possible, this is great for carving and also for burning to steady it and make a tripod. When you're making curves, for most part, you have a straight, flat edge here. And so if you're making curves, they're tough to make with a straight object. So you may have to turn your wood to get a good curve. We'll turn on the burner in just a minute and actually do it. But don't hesitate to move the wood around. Make it so that it's easy on your wrist and easy with keeping a good contact with the wood. Okay, you probably noticed I use sandbags. You can use sand or rice or sawdust, whichever works for you, but something that's going to support your piece and give you some support for your wrist. This can be very tiring on your hands and wrist, and so you want to make sure that you give yourself some support. Most of the pieces I make are small, so I put them in between a triangle shape here. If you make larger bowls, there's something called a stabilizer. Yeah, it's a pun, stabilizer. It's a chef tool, and Chef Line makes these, and you can put a larger bowl in it so that it gives you support. They created this for chefs to put a mixing bowl so that you can mix in it, but it definitely is a good tool to put your bowl in if you're working on larger pieces. So stabilizer. You can get them online. Amazon has them, or some of the nicer kitchen stores like Williams Sonoma, some of those type of places. After you're done with your burning, you want to lightly sand it, either 1000 or 1200. So you just remove the any overburn, any shadows, and also any leftover graphite lines, because you may have put on your design with a graphite paper. So just hit it a little bit with a 1000 or 1200, and that's usually good enough. If you're doing heavy burning, like basket weave or something that has a very heavy burn to it, the thing that you need is a brass brush to get in there and knock the char off of the piece. If you leave the char on, you can't get the paint to stick well. So a soft brass brush will knock off the char enough for the paint to stick. You can also use 91% isopropyl alcohol, and that will help reduce the char so that you can get your paint to stick. Another suggestion, oh, yes, sorry. Okay, he said that the 99% alcohol works better than the 91. Where do you find the 99? Okay, that like drugstore? Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, 99. Okay, I can look for that. Thank you. Yes, the 99 works better than the 91. We'll give it a try.
Mary, would you please repeat the question for our Zoom audience?
Sure. I'm sorry, the gentleman mentioned that 91% alcohol doesn't work as well as 99% alcohol, and that you can get it at grocery stores, drugstores. Was there anything else? Okay. That recommendation came from Molly Winton from a couple classes. Yes, for taking off the overburn and shadows. Okay, thank you. The last suggestion I'll give you is magnifiers. Whether it's magnifier glasses or a magnifier on a stand, it's very helpful for your work because you're working on very small areas. And I don't know about you, but my eyesight's not as good as it used to be. So magnifiers is definitely something that is helpful. Okay, we're gonna actually turn on the burner. See if we got power. We got power. So I'm just going to demo some of the different tips so that you can get a feel for what they look like. Start with this side. This is a writing tip. A lot of people use it to sign their names or make lines. They come in different sizes. This is a regular. They come in small and then micro. Micro is easier to write your name on the back of your piece with. But I've got the burner set at about 2. Let's see if it's ready. So, yep, that's definitely ready. A little bit of skipping, but you can see that that's kind of a fatter line. Let me show you how the blobs work. So if I come down, blob, then blob at the end. I'm using a little fan to pull away. I'm not going to make a whole lot of smoke, but just to pull away some of the smoke from me. So trying to do a circle. Sorry. So writing tips are one way to get a circle. I prefer a knife tip myself, but writing tip is something that you can use fairly. Their replacement tips for this are about $10. And they're pretty handy for just general burning. Let's switch sides and look at what a knife tip looks like. This is it's a soft edge to it, so it's not a long edge, and for me this is a really probably my go-to tip because it is a knife edge, but it has a rounded heel, and that heel makes it easier for me to do any sort of curves. So So here, you can see a little bit, let's do an overburn. Turn it up a little bit so you can see that it makes a shadow on each side. And that's what we're talking about with overburn, that you can either get off with a 99% alcohol, or that you can get off with a little bit of sandpaper, 1000 or 1200. This is the tool that I probably use the most. To me, it makes it really easy to make a curve. And it's fairly flexible. Curves are not going to turn out good. Let's see. That's kind of a weird shape, but you get the idea. I use this more than any of the rest of my tools. And you can see it's getting a little hot because it needs to be cleaned off. So you make carbon and every time you're drawing a line. So you want to keep your tool clean to avoid drag. Let's talk about some more interesting tools. Here is, this is a little spear shader. It's got a little spear tip on it. See that? Not very well. This is great for making patterns, and it's a razor tip pen. So I needed a adapter to have it fit on my Burnmaster, but as simple as plugging it in and then plugging it into here. So this the spear tip has more metal than what we were doing with the knife edge or the writing tool. Since there's more metal, you have to turn up the heat a little. Let's see if we can get this. Is that working? This is why you definitely need a good mask. So this makes an interesting little pattern and has some texture to it. You can tell my tool is pretty hot. It's almost red hot. And I've got my burner only at about 4. So this has a very high range that you can get these things really heated up. This will make an interesting pattern. I'll show you on an actual vase in just a minute or two how this looks on a vase. All right, that's enough of that. Let's switch to a Coalwood pen. This is Coalwood pen is this is a basket weave. And to show you how Coalwood pens change out, you take a little tool like this, little tool like that, and you just pull them out. So the tip looks like that. So they're interchangeable. They change pretty quick. There's a slot here that goes in a slot here. This little slot here goes in, and so that it stays in place. But what I was talking about with not a great connection, that's not as strong as a solid tip, as a solid pen. But it's pretty good, and Coalwood makes good pens. Don't need the adapter. So Coalwood pens work on the Burnmaster, and you'll find a lot of them out there. This is a basket weave that Molly Winton does, and the usual pattern is 2 of one direction and then 90 degrees, 2 of another direction. Yeah. So that's a basket weave texture right here. And I think it's easier if I show you on an actual vessel what it looks like. Thank you. So let's see here. We can go overhead. So this texture here, all along the sides, is that spade shader. So I'm making, I made some lines before I took it off the lathe, so that I had some marker lines to start, so I could go around evenly. And so I'm using these lines of spear shader to make a texture kind of like a rattan. And then on the frame for the flower, I'm using a basket weave to make a texture that looks kind of an interesting rattan frame. So all of this outside edges are burned very deeply, brushed off, and then painted. So this brown that you see is not the color of the wood, that's acrylic paints. So this is one that has 3 different flower scenes. It's called Flower Portraits. And I used my knife edge to make all the outline of the flowers, and then I painted them with acrylics. I did the texturing and then painted them with acrylics. And there's about 4 different colors of brown in here, so that it looks like it's not a solid blob of brown. So that's an idea. And it makes a nice little vase. So let's talk about what a simple design that you could do that would add some interest to a piece of wood that you've just turned. This is just a simple acacia scoop. Doesn't just as a practice turning, and by adding a little flower in the center, it adds something to it. I think it makes it a little interesting and not so ordinary. So that's just a sample of that. Took a 5-minute burning, just something really quick, but makes it different from just a plain scoop. Here's another scoop that is, I added a little color. There's a ladybug. So I put I used the knife edge, and then I used a large ball tip to give it dots. And then I used just a little bit of red paint, and that probably took me 10 minutes. So it just makes it more fun, something that's a little bit more interesting. This is a nice cherry bowl. And let's see here, this is just a nice little ginkgo pattern, ginkgo leaves. It adds to me, it adds something to this bowl. There's 2 of the larger ginkgo leaves and then 2 of the smaller leaves. And I think that makes the piece more interesting, and yet it's not covering up the wood. You still have brown. There's no bright colors to it, but it definitely makes it stand out. This is a cherry wig stand. Let's see how I can get this for you. There's the top. This is a wig stand that just has a little bit of burning on it. It's cherry, the pattern on the bottom, and then repeats on the top in a little bit smaller version. And then I put it on the sides and the center bead, and it just adds a little bit of interest without covering up the wood. Take the other wig stand. Thank you. This one is maple, and it has, let's see this way, a little heart pattern, heart and flowers on the top, and some hearts going around the bottom. This is basic, easy burning, doesn't cover the wood, but definitely adds something to it. So this is my chance to make a plug for the wig stand project. Not sure if you're aware of it. It's a community project the women in turning usually do, but we at our club in Phoenix, we've opened it up. Oh, sorry. We've opened it up to everyone in our club in Phoenix. So it's going to be the May's President's Challenge so that everyone can participate. We found a wonderful group called eBeauty that is an organization that provides 1,000 wigs a month to women who have hair loss from cancer treatment or have permanent hair loss from alopecia. So they send out 1,000 wigs a month. If it's one that's out of state, they're not going to send a wig stand because of the postage and shipping. But if it's someone in state, they can come and get fitted and they can take home a wig stand with their wig. Right now, they have a few wig stands left from New Hampshire Woodturners, and they're looking forward to our Phoenix Club contributing a whole bunch more wig stands. And it's an ongoing effort. If you want to participate, I can give you the information on how to get a hold of them. You can either take them down to Buckeye or we can come up and get them for them. But it's one of the community projects that we have started, and hoping that we can continue it because the need is there. And they're an amazing organization, all volunteers, and hope that you will participate. Give that one back. So let's talk about designs. How do I get a design on top of the wig stand? I am not an artist. Some of you are good. You could draw it freehand with a soft pencil. I'm not that type of artist. So one way is to find a design, put it on with graphite paper, put your graphite paper, tape your design, and then outline it so that you have a design to burn. I don't suggest carbon paper. A lot of carbon paper has waxy substance in it. So when you burn it, it will leave dark marks. And that's fine if you're painting it, but if you want the wood to be natural, it doesn't look so good. So where can you get patterns? Greeting cards, magazines, all kinds of advertisements. Or where do we all go? Google. You can Google line drawings, flowers, line drawings, leaves, line drawings, cars, whatever it is that you want a drawing for, you can get it on Google. Next set of slides, please. Okay. It's just amazing what's out there. And when you Google something, you'll pull up a whole bunch of different websites. Some of them want money. You don't have to use those. There are a lot of free ones that you can copy a design and you will be able to use it for free. If you're selling the design, that's different. They want money. But if you are just using a design, not for any profit, they're fine with you using them. Next one. So this at the top, I Googled line drawings, flowers. And so it pulled up all these different websites. And so I picked one, and next slide. So I like this little lotus flower. And so I can copy it, print it, go to a photocopy machine and enlarge it or reduce it so that it fits appropriately on the piece I'm working on. Or if you don't have access to a copy machine, the easiest thing to do is hit copy image. And then next slide. So I copied the image and I pasted it into Excel. So with Excel, you can then select the area around that picture. Next slide. And then print selection, and then print custom scaling. And when custom scaling, you might not have used, but it allows you to scale it up, scale it down to whatever size you need. It's very handy then because you find the perfect size for something. Envelopes, flower envelopes. So for this design, I first printed it on custom scaling at 65%, and it was too big. It's kind of Goldilocks, that was too big. So I printed it at 60%, and it was still just a tad big. So I finally settled on 55%, and that allowed me to get the design, the shape and size I wanted. I write the size on the back. So if I want to go back to it later, I can size it up, size it down to whatever I need. And it's just a very handy way to, without having a photocopy machine that enlarges and reduces, gets you the size you need. See, like these are 2 sunflowers. This one's at 85, this one's at 75. And you can see it makes a big difference. So what do I do with these? After I'm done with them, I might sometime use them in the future. So I put them in little envelopes. And that one's just flowers. There's one for leaves. There's one for vines. There's one for Christmas patterns, because you know you got to have it for the Christmas ornaments. So this is just an idea of how you can get designs to put on whatever piece you want, whether it's a bowl, a wig stand, whatever it is that you're working on. And I'll take this next. So we've done it on plain wood. What if we add a little color? I know that's against some of your beliefs, but what if we add a little color? There's a couple of ways to add color. One of them is acrylic paints, and they're very light, fast, they're easy to use, they're inexpensive. Another method is Prismacolor markers. They're like big, what do you call it, Sharpies. They have a fat end and a narrow end, and they come in any kind of color. It's just amazing. This one is pastels. You can buy them at Staples, Office Max, whatever office store, or you can get them at Dick Blick Art Supply. They have amazing selection. You can buy them individually, individual pens, or you can buy little sets of different colors, and they add a lot of color without being as thick as acrylic paints. As a sample, this is one that is burnt. I burned the leaves in place, and then there's about 4 different colors of green in the leaves to give it some depth. And then I put in some brown for the stems. I also was playing with my NSK and made little bubble holes. So it was just a fun project as to try adding some color. And these are somewhat translucent. They are color fast as long as you put lacquer over them. If it's in an area that's going to be in the sun a lot, I'd also put a UV protectant spray. But that's one way to get a little bit of color and without a whole lot of investment, and they're fun to play with. We're going to talk more about acrylic paints in the next section. Yes, Prismacolor. See here if we get this. Prismacolor. The question was, what was the type of color of markers? They're called Prismacolor. We're going to talk more about acrylic paints in the next section. We're going to talk a little bit about an easy pattern that you can do with basically making a leaf. This one was done by Andy Wolf. Last time we had a Desert Woodturners Roundup in Mesa, I believe it was 2016. She demoed this, and I love this pattern. It's just easy and versatile. And so it's basically a leaf made out of 2 arcs. I'm going to go to the whiteboard to show you. It's basically 2 arcs. So we make a leaf that way. And then the only other thing you need to do is make it into a leaf. You want to add a line for the center and some veins. Easy, right? So that's the whole basic part of this whole, it really is easy. First thing that you're going to do is make full leaves. We'll do a little bit of burning. Let's see here. This one back on. Okay. So we're just going to burn some leaves, and they're just random throughout the area that you wish to cover. So it's just a basic burning an arc, and you can move it if that helps. Need a little bit more heat. You're just burning an arc. So that's the basic pattern. You can make them larger or smaller, but it's random. Easy, right? Easy peasy. So next, if you think about the leaves, and you want to have a whole area of leaves, one's going to be on top of another, that you'll get some that you are just partial leaves. So you're doing okay? So you have one on top of another, and so you get partial leaves. Can you see that? Yeah. So we'll have some that are just until you fill the whole space. Real easy, just fill it in either a whole leaf or a half leaf, depending on what you have room for. And just remember, don't make them too small because you have to put the center line and some veins in there. Right? You have the idea, right? All right. The next thing we're going to do is put some center leaves, some center lines and veins in. Got that. So I'm just going to draw a center line. And then put in some veins. And I'm going to do that for all of the leaves. The only thing I would try to do is if one leaf has the veins going this way, maybe the one next to it will have the veins going the other way. So this one goes down, this one I'll go up. And that way I'm filling the space and making a pattern that is just full of leaves. When you get to a really small space that there doesn't look like there's room for a leaf, we'll make a tripod where it's a line and then maybe two tripod legs coming off of it, which kind of looks like a top of a leaf. And so you just fit those in areas where you can't get in a whole leaf. So you get the idea. So that's basically the whole idea is just filling it in with leaves, and then it will look like this. So you've got all the leaves filled in. Where you can't fit a full leaf, you put in a tripod, maybe in here, some little areas here. This is what you'd put on the rim of a bowl. And then you sand it down to 1200 or 1000. Let me mention that if you're doing it on the outside and the inside of a bowl, you have some leaves that are going to go over the edge. So it's like you're folding a leaf. So you would have some that you would have go over the edge so that part of it's down here, part of it's up here, part of it's up here, part of it's down there. You want them folded over the edge. And I'll pass out some examples in a little bit. Got that? Okay. All right. So a couple of things I've noticed from when I do this, how can I make it look better? So a couple of things to avoid. If you're putting in your leaves, try to have the line end at the center line. This is better than this. I always look for ways to make them better. That the vein should go all the way to the center line instead of skipping. And that if it should stay within the leaf instead of going outside of it. So that just makes it look a little bit better, like you took a little bit more time with it. Just improving it is what I'm looking to do. All right. So you can leave, this is a bowl that's finished. Sorry. This is a bowl that's finished. So inside, and then the leaves wrap around and it goes all the way to the bottom. So you could leave it like this and put your finish on it. It's very interesting that way. I like the pattern and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. You can pass that around, dear. Okay, okay. But say you want to do a little color. Say that it doesn't take very long. I'm a carver, so to me that's fast because carving takes a lot more time. Yeah, yeah. So the next thing that we can talk about is adding some color. So if I use, oh, we should talk about the paints first. So when you paint with acrylic paints, the first thing you want to do is add gesso. Gesso is it's kind of like a primer that you put on so that the paint has something to stick to. You can get gesso in white, you can get gesso in black, and it's just basically gives it some tooth for the paint to hold on to. Put on your gesso over the whole piece that you just covered with the leaves, and then let it dry overnight. Then next, you can add some acrylic paints. Acrylic paints are very easy to paint with because they're water soluble. These are golden fluid acrylics. And in the handout, I listed the colors that I used for these bowls. And the labels tell you a lot. So this is a chromium green, and you can tell that that's pretty opaque and not very shiny. And this is a green gold, and you can tell it's pretty transparent and very shiny. So the labels tell you a lot. And these little 1 ounce bottles go for between $7 and $12, depending on the color. And so these are the colors that I've used on the bowls, from a really dark green all the way up to a very light green. You can intermix, what's great about these colors is you can intermix them. They mix very well together, and a drop or two is all that you need. A drop or two, and then if you want to make a lighter color, add a drop of white. Yes.
Have you ever thinned your gesso to shape tone of your acrylics?
I have not ever thinned gesso. I have added a color to gesso, but I've never thinned the gesso. I say that you want a light blue background. You can add some blue paint to the white gesso and give it a different background color, but I've never thinned it.
I've thinned mine so that I can still pull the grain of the wood.
Mentioned that by thinning the gesso, the grain still pops through. That's an interesting idea. Okay, these are very easy to use and easy to mix. The colors I've listed in your handouts, but you can make alternate shades by mixing them together. You can also use any color combination that you want. I just picked greens because they're leaves. If one is too transparent, you can also add a drop of gesso. You could add a drop of white gesso to make it a little bit more opaque. We talked about gesso and the difference. There's a white gesso and a black gesso, and they do make a difference. I'm going to pass around 2 little bowls, and you can see which one is black gesso and which one is white. This way. And to me, the white one is a little bit lighter. The black one has a little bit more depth to it. But they turn out interesting, but definitely have a little bit different feel from the different background gesso. pass this around. All right, so using these colors, we've painted within the lines and have painted all the leaves so that they're all filled in. Okay, you could leave it at that and put some lacquer finish over it and call it good. Or as an option, you could add some more highlights. Highlights, you could use some iridescent paint. Iridescents, these are the ones that are $11 or $12 from Dick Blick, but these are 7 and 8. These are a little bit more expensive because of the materials they use to make them. This is gold, copper, and bronze, and they give you highlights, give you a little sparkle. They kind of make it fun. So in the next section, I've just added a little sparkle to it by adding the iridescent paints. I think they make just a little bit of a difference in popping the colors up a little. Okay, so if you're good with those and you want to take it a step further, you can add interference paints. Interference paints, let's see if I can get these up here. Interference paints actually have some material in them that bends the light. They actually are, they're not opalescent or pearlescent, but they sparkle and they change the color when they're viewed at different angles. So they're pretty transparent. They kind of look a little creamy. And there's a blue, a green, and a violet that I've used on the bowls that are going around. But you can use other colors also, or you can skip this step if it doesn't appeal to you. It's just an option, and to me, it's fun. I did get a little carried away on this one. It kind of looks like a peacock. It's a little bright, but there you go. It's you can see that with the interference paints, you've got blue and green and purple, and it definitely pops. This one I got a little carried away with. So speaking of painting, have you ever heard of wet water? Wet water. This is something that you can use if you're painting with acrylics and one starts to get a little bit dry and you need to take a break. You can do wet water, spray bottle. It is a combination of 1 drop of liquid dish soap to 100 drops of water. And just that little bit of dish soap will put a film on your paint and slow down the drying. You're not trying to thin the paint, you're just trying to slow it down from drying. So all you do is spray across it and it will slow down the drying enough so that you have more work time or have time to take a 5-minute break. So that's wet water. It's a great suggestion if you're using acrylics and you need a little bit more time, they're drying too fast on you. Wet water, it's 1 drop of liquid dish soap to 100 drops of water. Yes.
Have you ever used Golden's retarder?
Yes, that is an option too, is Golden's has a retarder that you can use that will slow down the drying of the paints. This is just cheaper and quick. But yes, that retarder is an option. The other question back? I actually did the 100 drops first. I think it's about ½ a cup, but I think test it and be sure. Okay. All right. Say that you aren't into the interference paints, but you want a little sparkle. I'm not going to make you watch a lot of paint dry, but I will show you this. We'll use just a tiny bit of painting. So another option is to use the iridescent paints and just highlight the veins of the leaves as an option, because it looks really cool with the veins being gold or silver. Let's see, where did I put my plate? All right, so I'm going to use a little, I'm sorry, question? 1 teaspoon, really? Okay, I guess it would depend on the dropper, that's true. It must have had a bigger, 5 milliliters. I must have used a whole lot bigger dropper. Anyway, experiment with that. I'm going to use a little bit of the gold and show you a little bit of what you can do to do the veins and not put a whole lot of iridescent paint. So I've got paper towel. Try not to make a mess here. So this is iridescent gold. And I'm just going to put it on a leaf. And then I'm going to pull it back with a damp paper towel. And it leaves the gold in the veins. I don't know if you can see that. We'll pass one around. But if you just paint over it and then pull it back, at first I was using my finger, but you know, it does get a little messy. And then just pull it back and it stays in the veins. It's really easy and yet it has a very nice look to it. This one. Thank you. I'm going to pass around a little box that has the veins highlighted. And it does have interference paints on them, but a little more subtly. So this has veins highlighted in copper and bronze and gold. And that's what I pass around. So that's another idea. I think that the interference colors look a little better on dark colors. They pop a little bit more. And that's why I always make sure I leave some dark colors in here. These are either sap green or Jenkins green, which are very dark. They kind of look blackish, but when you put the interference paints on them, they really, really pop. Okay, any questions on those? Okay. All right, when you're done, after they've dried overnight, you're going to put on spray lacquer, 4 to 6 coats. You want to make sure that you have good protection, that your acrylic paints don't get damaged. And let's talk about some other options. I'm going to go back to the whiteboard. Say that you aren't into leaves, but you want to make something that's pretty. Spray lacquer works pretty well on acrylics, and I do thin coats, but I do 4 to 6 to keep it very thin, and that's what's being passed around. Yeah. Oh, that works with the art store sells a type of lacquer that works with acrylic paints. Okay. What is it? A local art store? Oh, called the art store. Okay. Good name. That it could cause it to crinkle. I've not had that happen, but I am using very fine coats. So I'll look out for that. Another option you can do besides leaves with the same arc type of technique that comes up, we'll leave it there, is a flower. It uses the same kind of arc. You can use 5 or 6 leaves. 5 or 6 pair and make either a flower, and you could put several of these around on a bowl on a rim, or you could make them overlapping just like we did with the leaves. You could have some that are underneath and make it very dense, or you could just have a couple scattered around the bowl. I mentioned this, that they look really lovely in yellow and pink and orange because Mother's Day is coming up, just a hint. Other options. One other option that I've seen done that to me is cute, some people may not like it, but it's cute, is a fish. A fish is basically an arc with a tail. And so you can have in a rim of a bowl, a bunch of fish swimming around. And then there's always that one guy that's going the wrong way. So you could either leave them natural wood and just paint this guy, or you can paint them all different colors. But you don't have to do any overlapping, that there's space between them. So it's very quick and makes a fun rim of a bowl. All right, other questions? No? All right, here's another idea. You can make a nice shaped base, have the leaves at the top, and then start using fall colors as they come down. You can use your greens, your yellows and golds, browns, having them fall down to the bottom. So I kind of like that as something different from the solid leaf bowls. This was an experiment with India ink, and India ink is very messy. I suggest gloves and doing it outside. The best thing to remove India ink off your fingers is ammonia. I have experience to know. So India ink will support the acrylic paints. I don't think it sticks quite as well as gesso, but it looks pretty good. Nice, nice background. And then I'll show you one that's my favorite. This one, I really like the way it turned out. So this has all the acrylic paints, iridescent paints, and interference paints. And the edge then was painted black. And then after it was done painting it, it has a recess, and so put it back on the lathe and cleaned up the edge so that it's very crisp. And that made a very nice looking bowl. So, other questions? No? All right. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that you will try some wood burning. It makes a lot of fun. Thank you. Much time.
Thank you, Mary. That was outstanding. I think everybody really enjoyed it, and you've opened up some new ideas for us to try.
We often hear from some of our more artistic people how easy and quick this is. Define quick for that little bowl.
I can burn the bowl in one day. Painting it probably takes me 2 days. But to me, that's pretty fast because some of my carving projects will be a month.